Hey guys, welcome back to GX Stories Sleeping. Tonight we're heading somewhere you might think sounds exotic, mysterious, even a bit romantic. Medieval Persia. Imagine this. You open your eyes to a blinding sun blasting down on flat rooftops and dusty courtyards. The air already tastes of grit. Your tongue sticks to the roof of your mouth, and the only shade nearby is claimed by a very unimpressed goat. You probably won't survive this, honestly. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You roll out of a simple wool blanket, feeling straw prickling your back, and shuffle across a cool mud floor that's cracked like an old clay pot. Outside your tiny home, the sky is a blistering sheet of blue. You step into the courtyard where neighbors are already shouting about bread prices. There's no polite queue. It's a jostle of elbows and urgent bargaining. A vendor with a sunburned nose hawks water from a goatskin bag, swearing it's clean. You hand over a few copper coins, sip, and immediately wonder if the slight tang means it's, well, less than clean. Persian cities like Shiraz or Isfahan bustled with life, boasting soaring minarets and intricate tilework that glittered even in harsh sun. But in between these wonders, streets were narrow, dusty, and packed with people. Merchants pushing carts, children darting under laden donkeys, and stray dogs nosing through scraps. An open sewer trickled down one side of the road, contributing a ripe bouquet that mingled with saffron and sweat. Here's a mainstream fact for you to tuck away before sleep steals it. By the 12th century, many Persian cities were among the largest in the world, some nearing 500,000 souls. A true medieval metropolis. Of course, with that many people squeezed together, sanitation was more of a suggestion than a system. Chamber pots emptied right into alleys. You'd better keep your sandals on. As you drift past vendors shouting about dates and almonds, a fringed little curiosity floats your way. The belief that certain sweet-smelling flowers, like jasmine, could ward off plague. Merchants tied bundles of it to their stalls, hoping to keep disease at bay, a practice both charming and desperately wishful. Scholars still debate exactly how interconnected daily life was across social classes here. Did peasants rub elbows with scholars at the same market stalls? Or did the learned men keep strictly to their own refined circles? Records are patchy, and you're left to wonder as you pass a cluster of stern-faced men scribbling notes on parchment, noses practically touching their ink-stained hands. Then a fly lands on your cheek, snapping you back. You swipe it away and sigh, realizing this morning is just the start. The sun is only climbing higher, and you're already sweating through your tunic. Later, if you're lucky, you might catch a glimpse of the palace gardens. But for now, all that waits is more heat, more dust, and the constant gamble that your water won't send you running for the nearest privy. You jerk up to see a small, glistening scorpion scuttle into a crack in the wall. You're not alone. Persian homes, for all their clever insulation, are cozy retreats for less welcome guests. Spiders, beetles, centipedes, and of course, scorpions with stingers curled like tiny poisoned hooks. Locals sometimes say that if you see 3 scorpions in one day, it means a traveler will arrive. You're not sure you want either. A sudden gust rattles the wooden shutters. Outside, the clear sky turns a strange brownish yellow. The air smells dry, sharp, almost electric. Then the wind roars to life. A sandstorm. Grains of dust whip through every crack, scouring your skin, sticking to your lips, settling in your eyelashes. You duck your head under a cloth and try to breathe through it, but soon there's grit between your teeth. Historically, these storms were no joke. Chroniclers of the time described them as walls of choking dust, sometimes darkening the day to an eerie twilight. Trade caravans disappeared into them, reappearing hours later looking ghost-like, robes and turbans stained with sand. Even today, meteorologists argue over the exact climatic cycles that caused the worst of them. Was it unusually intense drought? Shifts in regional wind patterns? They pore over old records, hoping the scribbled complaints about brown storms will offer more clues. When the gusts finally settle, your house looks as if it's been sifted over with cinnamon. You wipe down a bench, but the dust just smears into muddy streaks. A neighbor wanders by, his turban half unwrapped, muttering something about how his goat refuses to come out of the shed. You offer a sympathetic nod. You'd stay hidden too if you could. At dusk, when the air cools slightly, you step back outside, only to narrowly miss stepping on another hazard, a cluster of tiny reddish ants. These little brutes have a painful bite that can leave your foot throbbing. Locals sprinkle ash or lime around their door frames to keep them at bay, though whether it truly works or is just an old superstition is still up for scholarly debate. Your mud brick home, for all its shortcomings, does have a kind of rustic charm. The roof is flat, perfect for sleeping under the stars on nights when it's too hot to bear the cramped interior. Many Persians drag their bedding up there, sharing quiet stories and cooling breezes. Tonight, though, after that storm, you're not so sure the roof won't still be dust-choked. You decide to risk the inside, hoping the scorpions have found other nooks to hide in. As you lie back down, you realize that despite the buzzing insects and the faint, acrid scent of old fires, there's something calming here. Until, of course, you remember that tomorrow might bring another storm, or another scorpion, or just the same relentless sun waiting to toast you anew. You wake to find your goat missing. This is not the start to a good day. You shuffle out into the dusty lane, your tunic twisted and damp from sleep, and start asking neighbors. A boy points toward the edge of town, where the local tax collector is staging a little spectacle. 2 officials, a scribe, and a handful of grinning assistants who look far too pleased about confiscating property. This sort of heavy taxation was a staple of the era, a mainstream historical tidbit. Records from the 11th and 12th centuries show entire villages petitioning local governors for relief, complaining that their tax burdens left them barely enough grain to survive. Some petitions were granted, some ignored, and many simply vanished into dusty archives, much like your goat now disappears down the road. Your neighbor sidles up, sighing. "Better your goat than your cart," he mutters, because a cart is harder to replace, though you're not convinced. With that goat went your breakfast for the next season. You thank him for the bleak pep talk. What's oddly fascinating is how many small folk still try to cheat the system. A quirky footnote from traveling merchants. It was common to smear mud on copper coins to disguise them as the cheaper, more heavily taxed kind, hoping collectors wouldn't scratch them to check. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it earned a beating. Some scholars argue about just how extensive these petty frauds were. Were they isolated acts of desperation, or a widespread underground economy of dodging taxmen? The jury's still out, scribbling away in academic journals. By afternoon, you head to the market square where a crowd has gathered. The taxman scribe is reading out new levies decreed by a local governor. It's all flowery language and threats of seizure, delivered with theatrical flourishes. Meanwhile, you stand there calculating which small items you might pawn next. Your wife's bronze bangle, the half-rusted kitchen pan. Not exactly riches, but worth something. Then comes the kicker. A passing messenger shouts news of a wedding at the Shah's palace. A lavish affair that will be funded partly by new provincial taxes. The crowd groans. You manage a weak laugh. A little joke to yourself that maybe your goat is attending the banquet on your behalf. You trudge home with shoulders slumped, the sun finally slipping low and painting everything in tired golds. Another day spent watching your meager security evaporate, one goat at a time. By nightfall, you're left with a pit in your stomach and the faint hope that tomorrow the taxmen will have moved on to some other poor fool's courtyard. You wake the next morning with a low groan, your back stiff from that thin straw mat, and wander out into the street to find a swirl of people heading toward the nearest mosque. It's Friday, the main congregational day, and the entire quarter seems to pour into the courtyards. You decide to follow, drawn by curiosity and perhaps the chance to stand in the shade of those graceful arches. Inside, the mosque's tiled walls shimmer with cobalt and turquoise patterns that catch the morning light like tiny oceans. The call to prayer has already rung out, a long, soaring chant that you'll catch yourself humming later when you least expect it. You slip off your sandals, feet cool on the stone floor, and shuffle through the crowd. Everywhere are men murmuring under their breath, some eyes closed in earnest devotion, others slyly glancing about to see who's watching whom. Here in medieval Persia, theology isn't just a private affair. Scholars gather to debate interpretations of the Quran, to argue fiercely over fine points of law and philosophy. Sometimes these debates become legendary, drawing listeners from far-off towns. A mainstream fact for your sleepy brain: Persian madrasas, Islamic schools, were centers of learning that attracted students from across the Islamic world, teaching not just religion, but poetry, medicine, even astronomy. You pause near a cluster of students seated cross-legged around a bearded teacher who gestures dramatically with an ink-stained hand. His voice rises, echoing off the cool tiles, as he launches into a passionate defense of some tricky point of divine justice. You don't dare inch closer. One poorly chosen word here could brand you a blasphemer, or at the very least, an ignorant fool ripe for public embarrassment. And they took this very seriously. A quirky tidbit: in some Persian regions, it was said you could be fined a hefty sum for speaking heretical nonsense in a public gathering. That might sound harsh, but considering the alternative, say, being accused of outright heresy, it was almost merciful. Local gossip spins tales of a spice seller who questioned a jurist's ruling and found himself pelted with rotten pomegranates until he apologized. Scholars still argue if such stories were exaggerated moral fables or glimpses of genuine mob justice. You slip away from the scholarly cluster and drift into a shaded arcade where old men sit with prayer beads, whispering blessings or reciting poetry. The gentle click-click of beads is oddly soothing. Then your stomach growls, startling you and one of the elders, who eyes you with polite disapproval. You bow your head slightly and move on. Outside again, the sunlight is brutal after the mosque's soothing coolness. You can't help but glance over your shoulder at the towering minaret, rising like a delicate needle into the pale sky. For all the dangers of saying the wrong thing here, there's also something mesmerizing about how religion saturates every part of life, from law courts to love poems to simple greetings in the street. It makes your own words feel heavier on your tongue, like each careless joke might echo much farther than intended. By evening, you're back in your cramped courtyard, running a hand along the low mud wall, and thinking about how careful your neighbors seem with their speech, always peppering it with little blessings, just in case. Maybe you'll start doing the same. After all, in this bustling world of mosques, scholars, and ever-watchful ears, a tiny slip could mean far more than just a bit of gossip at your expense. Your morning routine takes a pleasant twist when your neighbor, an older woman with a silver tooth and a wicked sense of humor, invites you to the local hammam. You stink of goat and old clay. She laughs, tugging your sleeve. You sniff yourself and decide she's not wrong. So off you shuffle together through twisting lanes to the bathhouse, a domed structure that seems to sweat right along with the city. Inside, warm mist curls around archways. A porter takes your few coins and hands you a thin linen wrap. Modesty is a flexible concept here. Men and women usually bathe separately, though at different times of day rather than in entirely separate buildings. Today's a men's hour, and so you slip inside, trying not to stare as local merchants and scribes lounge half-naked on stone benches. The hammam is a marvel of Persian city life, a mainstream nugget. Since at least the 9th century, these bathhouses weren't just about cleanliness. They were also vital hubs for social news, matchmaking schemes, and even casual business deals. If you wanted to learn whose daughter was engaged, or whether the grain shipment had arrived, this was the place. Hot water steams from great copper boilers. An attendant, muscled, with a half-bored look, motions you to sit. He proceeds to scrub your back with a coarse glove that feels about as gentle as a cat's tongue made of sandpaper. You wince, clutch your knees, and try to laugh it off when he slaps your shoulders approvingly. Nearby, someone yelps, either from scalding water or the latest gossip about a local tax scandal. Hard to tell. A quirky note from travelers' diaries. Some visitors claimed hammams doubled as clandestine meeting spots for lovers. The line between wholesome scrubbing and illicit rendezvous could blur under all that mist. Scholars still debate just how rampant these steamy side plots were. Were they colorful exaggerations by prudish outsiders? Or genuinely scandalous local secrets? The old poems certainly wink suggestively about it. Eventually, your attendant gestures for you to lie flat. He cups your shoulders and, with no warning at all, cracks your back so loudly you're sure something's broken. Then he pours a bucket of hot water over your head, washing away both the dirt and the last of your dignity. Still, when you sit up, your skin tingles pleasantly, and you have to admit you feel lighter. You shuffle to a corner to dress again, trying not to slip on wet tiles. A young man beside you is explaining how he hopes the fresh rose oil he's purchased will make him irresistible at the evening poetry recitation. You grin, wish him luck, and step back into the glaring sun, limbs pleasantly rubbery. On the way home, you find yourself wondering how many secrets floated around in that steam, how many marriage deals were struck, debts forgiven, rivals slandered with careless whispers. The hammam might leave your skin scrubbed raw, but your mind emerges stuffed full of half-heard intrigues. And maybe, you think, that's just part of staying clean here. Not just washing your body, but making sure you're current on all the stories that keep a person safe in this tangled, gossip-fed society. Your refreshed, scrubbed skin doesn't last long. Within a few days, you're curled up on your reed mat, shivering under the same blanket that was too hot just yesterday. Your stomach feels like it's trying to turn inside out, and your head swims every time you sit up. A neighbor pokes her head in, clucks her tongue, and disappears, only to return with a lean, stooped man lugging a wooden case. Congratulations, you've earned a visit from the local hakim, a physician whose toolkit is equal parts science, tradition, and things best left unexplained. He opens his box to reveal knives, glass cups, and a little pot of fat wriggling leeches. Fantastic. A mainstream historical tidbit to settle into your fever dreams. Persian medicine in the medieval period was remarkably advanced for its time. Works like Avicenna's Canon of Medicine were studied from Samarkand to Spain, but high scholarship didn't always trickle down to everyday practice. While a royal court doctor might carefully balance your humors through diet and gentle tonics, the village hakim often skips straight to more dramatic remedies. Your healer first presses your pulse, mutters something about your bile being too hot, then gestures for your arm. Out comes a brass cup, heated by a candle until it's almost too hot to hold. He plops it down on your skin. The sudden suction pulls at your flesh, leaving a dark, aching bubble that's supposed to draw out whatever foul spirit lurks inside you. Then he reaches for the leeches. You try to protest. Maybe weakly mention that last time you just waited it out and survived anyway. But it's too late. The little monsters latch on, cold and shockingly strong, and you watch in queasy horror as your blood darkens their slippery bodies. When he finally plucks them off, you're left with tiny bleeding mouths on your arm that take forever to clot. A quirky nugget. Some hakims recommended mixing ground pearls or crushed emeralds into certain remedies, believing the shimmering dust carried divine purity. Whether it helped or just bankrupted the hopeful is still an open scholarly question, debated by historians rummaging through old ledgers and prescription lists. Your healer isn't quite done. He produces a thin iron rod, heats it in a brazier until it glows a cheerful orange, and says it might be wise to seal your bad humors. You decide to pass on cauterization for today, offering him an extra coin to simply recite protective verses instead. He agrees with a shrug. After all, faith can be its own medicine here, or at least a safer placebo. When he finally packs up and leaves, the room feels strangely empty. You lie there, arm throbbing, wondering if you're genuinely better or just too exhausted to keep panicking. Outside, you hear children chanting some skipping rhyme about scorpions and thieves, their voices a gentle backdrop that almost lulls you to sleep. By nightfall, you're propped against the wall, sipping weak pomegranate juice and watching moonlight creep across the floor. You still feel lousy, but there's a tiny spark of relief that the hakim's more extreme tools stayed in his box. For now, you drift off, hoping that tomorrow you'll have the strength to shuffle back to the market, or at least enough energy to avoid another charming round of leech therapy. You wake to your stomach's complaints, a long, hollow groan that reminds you you've barely eaten since yesterday's healing ordeal. So you drag yourself up, shoulders sore where the cups left faint bruises, and head toward the market square. The bazaar is already in full swing, a noisy tangle of humanity under patchwork canopies. The air is heavy with so many smells, it's hard to sort them out. Sweet dates piled high, piles of cumin and coriander, pungent garlic. Somewhere close, someone's frying fish. And even closer, you get a solid whiff of sheep manure from a drover passing by with a stubborn flock. You pause at a stall where vibrant saffron threads are carefully weighed on tiny brass scales. This deep red gold costs more than silver by weight, destined to stain rice into jewel-like feasts for the rich. The vendor eyes you hopefully. You just smile, shake your head, and move on. Not today. Maybe not ever. Instead, your eyes drift to a butcher's stall. Carcasses hang from wooden pegs, dripping slowly onto stained boards. A mainstream fact: meat wasn't necessarily scarce here. Persia's grazing lands meant mutton and goat were staples. But refrigeration was, well, non-existent. Cuts often hung for hours or even a day in the sun. A swirl of flies proves the point, buzzing from lamb ribs to the merchant's sweaty neck, with complete disregard for your fragile digestion. A nearby boy fans the meat half-heartedly with a palm frond. You wonder if it does more for appearances than actual hygiene. Some cooks swear by intense spices and vinegars to mask any hints of rot. Scholars still debate just how dangerous these markets truly were. Did people build up natural immunities from constant low-grade exposure? Or did these stalls fuel periodic outbreaks of gut-wrenching misery? You end up buying a small loaf studded with crushed dates and a handful of walnuts from a breadwoman who calls you darling lamb and pats your shoulder with floury hands. It's the safest bet. Bread rarely lies. As you nibble, you pass clusters of women selling rose water by the tiny glass vial, bright indigo for cloth dye, and little cones of henna to stain hands for weddings. A quirky tidbit drifts by in conversation. One merchant proudly claims that a wealthy caravan recently brought Persian ice, all the way from distant mountains, packed in straw and rushed by camel to chill sherbet for a wedding. True? Hard to say, but it tickles your overheated mind to imagine noble guests spooning snow while your neighbors grumble over lukewarm goat stew. Your stroll takes longer than it should because every few steps you're sidestepping beggars, stray dogs, or some impromptu street performer juggling clay cups. At one point, a snake charmer plays a reed flute, swaying as a fat serpent lifts its head from a basket. The crowd oohs and laughs nervously. You do too, though from a prudent distance. By dusk, the market's clamor fades into scattered conversations. Lanterns flicker to life, casting long, trembling shadows across stalls now being packed down. You catch yourself glancing at that butcher's table again, still streaked red, and decide maybe tomorrow's meal will come from your neighbor's lentil pot instead. Safer, simpler, and a lot less likely to end with another visit from the friendly village leeches. Evening finds you perched on a worn stone by the town gate, chewing a piece of that date bread while watching dust swirl around a newly arrived caravan. The animals are exhausted, long-legged camels blinking lazily, their saddles crusted with salt from dried sweat. Traders climb down stiffly, stretching sore backs, and start shouting for porters. You're tempted to wander closer. After all, these caravans are the beating heart of Persian prosperity, spilling new goods and stories across the land. A mainstream fact to lull your curiosity. By the height of the medieval Silk Road, Persia sat smack in the middle of trade flowing from China to the Mediterranean. Spices, silks, precious gems, even the rumor of far-off inventions like paper money, all passed through caravanserais dotting the countryside. These roadside inns were vital, offering travelers a chance to rest, water their beasts, and swap the latest gossip from Samarkand or Damascus. Curiosity gets the better of you. By nightfall, you've decided to join a cluster of drovers heading out toward the next town, hoping to see one of these caravanserais firsthand. The journey starts pleasantly enough, under a velvet sky pricked with stars. You walk alongside traders speaking in a sing-song dialect you only half grasp, their torches bobbing like tiny earthbound comets. But the road isn't exactly safe. A quirky tidbit that's probably doing nothing for your peace of mind. Some caravan guides carried small bags of sesame seeds, supposedly to scatter behind them so evil spirits would stop to count each one, giving travelers a head start. Whether demons or mere opportunistic humans, threats did lurk. Banditry plagued these highways, with local warlords sometimes turning a blind eye if the thieves agreed to share the loot. Sometime after midnight, your party reaches a squat, fortress-like building. Thick walls bristle with tiny arrow slits. Inside the courtyard, travelers unroll thin blankets, share boiled chickpeas, and gossip in a dozen languages. You find a corner of straw, curl up, and listen as two men argue over whether a Mongol raiding party was spotted near Tabriz. Scholars still debate just how frequent such attacks were, versus how much they became exaggerated fireside fodder. Either way, the possibility keeps your eyes wide open. The night is long. Someone snores nearby, Goats bleat irritably from a pen, and every so often a guard stomps past, lantern in hand, eyes scanning the dark. You try to relax by counting your own breaths, but your mind keeps returning to the earlier sight of a trader showing off tiny blue beads. Lapis lazuli from Badakhshan, he claimed, worth more than your entire street of mud brick homes. If bandits knew that, would these walls really hold? Dawn finds you stiff, mouth dry, but grateful to be alive and still in possession of your modest purse. The traders saddle up again, urging camels to their feet with loud clicks and shouts. You decide you've had enough adventure and will head home at the next crossroad. It's clear that on these legendary roads, fortunes change hands, wonders arrive from distant lands, and people vanish into the dark, sometimes without a trace. You hitch up your robe and start the slow trek back, silently thanking whichever spirit was too busy counting sesame seeds to bother with you last night. You finally limp back into your own dusty quarter, feet blistered from days on rough roads, only to find the town humming with a very different tension. Gossip darts from doorway to doorway like nervous sparrows. Apparently, a minor noble, someone tied to the Shah's distant kin, has been accused of plotting against the palace. By mid-morning, rumors inflate the story into a grand conspiracy involving silk merchants, tax scribes, and even a traveling poet who recited one too many edgy verses. You keep your head down. These aren't the kind of scandals where bystanders remain safely uninvolved. In medieval Persia, a slip of your tongue could easily be twisted into seditious talk. The Shah's court, glittering with jewels and intricate calligraphy, also bristled with hidden knives. A mainstream detail that might chill you more than the evening winds. Historical records show that Persian rulers, from local governors up to mighty shahs, routinely relied on networks of informants. Tavern keepers, caravan guides, even household servants might double as ears for the state. One careless joke about taxes, and someone could be whispering your words to an official before sunset. You pass a group gathered by a fountain, where a scribe dramatically reads a proclamation. Apparently, certain confiscated estates are being redistributed. A polite way of saying heads rolled, and now their vineyards belong to the loyalists. You don't need much imagination to picture the trials that preceded this redistribution. Public executions were common enough. Beheadings often happen right in the market square, sometimes followed by the head being paraded around on a pike as a very literal sign of who was in charge. A quirky local belief floats to mind. Some folks tie little knots in bits of string, muttering quick prayers to confuse the evil eye and protect themselves from being falsely accused. Superstitious, sure, but when half the town is on edge and the guards suddenly seem twice as watchful, tying a knot feels like a harmless insurance policy. Meanwhile, scholars of medieval Persian governance still argue about how deeply such court intrigues trickle down to the average citizen. Did local farmers and small merchants genuinely quake over distant coups? Or did they mostly shrug unless a new tax rolled in or soldiers showed up demanding supplies? The dusty ledgers of old estates give hints, but no final answers. Late that afternoon, you decide to brave the bazaar again, though it's noticeably quieter. People speak in cautious half-sentences, their eyes darting sideways. Even the fruit vendor who usually roars out prices keeps his voice low. You nod politely, pick out a bruised fig, and hand over coins with the faintest tremor in your hand. As you turn to leave, you catch sight of an elegantly dressed official dismounting his horse, flanked by guards in polished helmets. The crowd parts like water. You look down at your sandals, at the dusty street, anywhere but at his face. Then, breathing as evenly as you can, you slip away down a narrow alley, heart thudding. You've just seen enough court drama from a very safe distance, and that's precisely how you plan to keep it. By evening, back in your little courtyard, you press a hand over your racing chest and watch the sunset flame out behind crumbling rooftops. Whatever else tomorrow might bring, tonight you are grateful your neck remains comfortably attached to your shoulders. Night falls thick and velvety, with a low sliver of moon hanging over your roof like a watching eye. You lie on your back, hoping for sleep, but instead your mind dances with eerie whispers picked up in the market. Persian towns teem with superstition, not just polite blessings, but an entire shadow world of fears. As a soft wind rattles your shutter, you think of the local tales of jinn, invisible spirits, mischievous or downright malicious, who slip through cracks in reality and meddle with human lives. Some swirl through abandoned ruins. Others haunt dark groves where old blood might have been spilled. A mainstream thread running through Persian folklore. Jinn weren't necessarily evil. They could be tricksters, helpers, or harbingers of ominous fortune. Still, most folks preferred to keep them at a respectful distance. So you do what many do. In the morning, you tie a tiny turquoise bead into the fringe of your headscarf. A charm against the evil eye. A neighbor stops to admire it, squinting approvingly, and mutters a quick protective verse over you, just in case. This practice of warding off jealousy or malevolent stares is everywhere. Merchants dangle blue stones over their stalls. Mothers hang tiny amulets on babies' cribs. Even the local baker scratches cryptic symbols into the flowery walls of his oven. Half prayer, half warning. A quirky snippet you pick up over cups of weak tea. Some say if you hear your name called at night, when no one's there, it's a jinn trying to lure you into the dark. You smile at the tale, pretend to scoff, but you still check behind you on the way home. Scholars of Persian folk religion argue about how much these fears were purely peasant fare versus widely held beliefs across all classes. Some old court diaries suggest even learned men wore talismans stitched discreetly into their robes. You shuffle through the bazaar one afternoon and nearly trip over a small street stand piled high with silver-threaded amulets. The seller insists these charms were blessed by a famous dervish from Qom, guaranteed to turn away curses and ill luck. You buy one, mostly to avoid his persistent grin, and tie it to your belt. Later that night, as you catch sight of its little glint in lantern light, you're oddly comforted. But not all stories end softly. That same night, you sit around a courtyard brazier with neighbors who swap darker tales. A man claims he once saw a woman by the city walls speaking softly to someone who wasn't there, then watched her eyes roll back, voice twisting into an eerie growl. Another insists he heard coins clinking in his storeroom at midnight, only to find nothing but a faint sulfur scent. You all laugh nervously, but each keeps an anxious eye on the deep shadows gathering beyond the flickering flame. Eventually, you retreat to your mat, pull the blanket over your shoulder, and whisper a small protective phrase you picked up from a passing pilgrim. Maybe it's foolish, or maybe it's precisely what keeps you safe, cradled between the ancient bricks of your modest home, while unseen things creep through the lanes of medieval Persia. Dawn breaks bright and pitiless, the sun already stretching its fingers across your courtyard. You shuffle out to check your tiny patch of barley, hoping yesterday's stories of jinn and evil eyes were only fit for lantern-lit fears. But the real-world demons of medieval Persia are far less mysterious. They come on wings and in clouds. Your crop looks poor. The barley stalks stand thin and spindly, their heads drooping as if ashamed. There's been hardly a decent rain in months. A mainstream historical fact to anchor this scene. Drought was a constant specter across much of Persia's arid regions. Irrigation systems, from simple qanats, underground channels, to elaborate canals, were engineering marvels that kept cities alive. But when a drought dragged on too long, even the cleverest channels ran dry. As you kneel to tug at the dusty earth, a neighbor rushes by shouting, "They're coming from the west!" It takes a moment to understand. Then you hear it, a strange, dry rattling, like rain that isn't wet. You look up to see the sky ripple, a mass of locusts descending in a living sheet. Your heart sinks. Farmers everywhere have their local omens, and here in Persia, a sudden warm wind from the desert often heralds locust swarms. A quirky belief you've heard murmured over market stalls. Some folks tried to ward off infestations by hanging bits of bright cloth in fields, hoping the color would confuse or repel the insects. Whether it works is questionable. Scholars still argue whether such customs were based on observed results or pure desperate folklore. By evening, the swarm has moved on, leaving ragged stalks and half-chewed leaves in its wake. You wander the edge of your tiny field, toes sinking into dusty furrows, calculating what you might salvage. Not much. A skinny harvest means thin porridge, less to trade, and certainly fewer coins to keep the taxman appeased. Your thoughts drift to that confiscated goat from weeks back, and a sour chuckle escapes. Maybe your barley is following the same fate. Returning home, you find your household fretting over stores. Clay jars hold a dwindling supply of lentils and dried onions, tied with cloth lids to keep out weevils. You ladle out a small handful for supper, telling yourself you'll barter for more next market day. But with so many families in the same straits, what could you possibly offer that they don't already have too little of themselves? Later that night, as you lie on your mat, your mind circles around an open, scholarly debate. Just how frequently did these natural crises spiral into full famine? Chroniclers often exaggerated disasters for dramatic effect. It made for more gripping royal petitions, after all. Yet the archaeological record does show periodic layers of abandoned settlements and signs of sudden nutritional stress in human remains. The truth likely wavers somewhere in the middle, like a candle flame in a draft. You close your eyes, letting the night sounds wash over you. Somewhere a dog barks. A donkey brays once, then falls silent. You murmur a small prayer, half to God, half to the spirits of the fields, that tomorrow the sky will be empty of wings and full of merciful clouds. Morning finds you trudging toward the bazaar again, clutching a small basket of onions to trade. The streets feel oddly strained. Thinner crowds, fewer shouts from vendors. Maybe it's the locust damage still rippling through the town's nerves, or maybe it's just another cycle of tight belts and cautious eyes. Either way, your stomach gives a low, accusing growl. At the market, you hover near a spice stall, half for the rich, peppery scent that distracts your appetite. The merchant, with a beard streaked white like frost, tries to tempt you with a pinch of sumac. You smile politely and shake your head. No coin for luxuries. What you do have, though, is a chance to watch local craftsmen at work. That's one bright spark in this daily grind. Persian artisans are magicians of clay, metal, and thread. A mainstream fact to savor. Persian ceramic workshops in cities like Kashan and Ray produced wares so finely glazed they were exported all the way to Cairo and Venice. Bowls shimmered with sapphire blues and delicate calligraphic bands that turned even soup into a work of art. Not that you're eating out of such treasures. Your bowl is a rough slipware job, sturdy and chipped at the rim. But you stop to admire a potter's wheel anyway. His deft hands coax up a thin, elegant neck from a mound of damp clay, the entire vessel seeming to rise like a living thing. Nearby, a weaver knots silk threads into a pattern of looping vines that might take weeks, or months, to finish. You wonder who'll buy it. Probably a wealthy household far from your crumbling lane. A quirky street-side tidbit. A boy offers to etch your name, along with a tiny poem, onto a brass charm to make your words sweet on others' ears. You're tempted. Who couldn't use a bit more charm? But decide your onions are too precious for that trade. Still, you watch him scrawl quick, graceful lines on a scrap of wax tablet before chiseling the final design. Scholars still debate just how much this flood of exquisite art and craft filtered down to folks like you. Did ordinary shopkeepers really own gorgeously patterned tiles in their courtyards? Or was that privilege mostly reserved for wealthy patrons and palatial estates? Archaeological digs turn up hints in modest homes. A chipped turquoise shard here, a faded textile scrap there, suggesting at least fragments of beauty found their way into humbler hands. You finally exchange your onions for a small cone of sheep cheese and a scoop of cracked wheat, tucking it all carefully into your basket. It's not a feast, but it'll pad out the thin soups for a few days. As you shuffle back down the dusty lane, the faint clang of a coppersmith's hammer rings behind you, bright and clear as a temple bell. Later, reclining against your courtyard wall, you nibble that cheese and think about all those bright glazes and delicate knots of silk. Even in the grittiest corners of medieval Persia, beauty insists on pushing through the cracks, fragile, impractical, and stubborn as a wildflower sprouting from dry stone. It's a cool evening when you wander toward the edge of town, drawn by the sound of a reed flute and the low thump of a drum. You find a small crowd gathered around a circle of lanterns, faces upturned in eager anticipation. Tonight, a traveling troupe is performing. Poets, musicians, maybe even a shadow play if the mood strikes them. You slip into the ring just as a slender man in embroidered robes steps forward, holding a thin scroll. He unrolls it with a flourish and begins to chant. His voice weaves through the warm air, words sliding together in elegant rhymes that speak of long-lost lovers, heroic battles, gardens heavy with roses, and nightingales crying beneath moonlight. A mainstream historical delight. Persian poetry from this era, especially the ghazals and masnavis, was so celebrated that even merchants copied verses onto account books. Love of verse cut across every layer of society. Nearby, an older woman mouths along, clearly knowing each stanza by heart. You catch yourself swaying slightly. Despite everything, taxes, leeches, a bandit's drought, people still come out to hear words that promise the world can be tender and bright. Then the troop's drummer picks up the pace, and suddenly a bear lumbers into the circle. It's muzzled and led by a man shaking a staff capped with tiny bells. The crowd roars. You're half horrified, half unable to look away. The bear rises awkwardly on its hind legs and shuffles in time to the drum, big paws dangling. A quirky, uncomfortable note from travelers' diaries. Performing bears and monkeys were not uncommon sights in Persian towns. Some owners claimed to train them through songs and treats, others through harsher means best left unspoken. Scholars still debate how widespread these practices were, fleeting amusements or a routine feature of local fairs. The bear lumbers off at last, rewarded with handfuls of sticky figs, and the mood shifts again. Now a pair of boys step forward, unfurling a white sheet between them. A small lamp is lit behind it. Shapes spring up. A cunning fox, a proud lion, a laughing maiden, all played by quick fingers and scraps of carved wood. The children in the crowd gasp and squeal. Even you find yourself smiling, leaning in, forgetting for a moment about empty barley jars or tax collectors sniffing around your lane. When the show ends, people linger. Some press coins into the performers' hands. Others simply clap them on the back or offer morsels of bread. You stand there a little longer, watching the lantern flames twitch in the breeze. It strikes you how gatherings like this knit the town together. Tomorrow, the same neighbor who cackles over gossip or fights you for the best onions at market might repeat one of tonight's verses under their breath, gentler somehow. It's a fragile magic, easily blown out by war drums or famine, yet here it persists. Poems by lantern light, a shadow maiden dancing across linen, a crowd breathing as one. You make your way home with the rhythms of the flute still curling around your thoughts. By the time you reach your courtyard, you're half convinced those stories of moonlit nightingales are real, perched just beyond your wall, waiting to sing you to sleep. The next day drifts by in a slow haze. You're perched on your low stool, repairing a frayed sandal strap, when a clamor from the main road snaps you upright. You wander out to see what the fuss is about, and find the town's guard captain riding through with half a dozen soldiers, all armored in dull chainmail that clinks with every jostle. They're escorting a high official, judging by the embroidery on his cloak and the large, preening falcon perched on his gauntlet. You press back against a wall as they pass, careful not to meet any soldier's eye. It's a vivid slice of medieval Persian politics right in your dusty lane. A mainstream historical truth. While Persia's rulers built soaring palaces and sponsored breathtaking art, they also tangled constantly with rebellious lords, border raiders, and ambitious family members. Governance was as much about dazzling ceremony as it was about making sure your rivals were too intimidated or too dead to challenge you. Your eyes fix on that falcon. Birds of prey were a prestige obsession among Persian nobility. A quirky tidbit. Some royal courts kept entire menageries of eagles, hawks, and even trained cheetahs, all tended by specialist handlers. It was a sign of refined control over nature. A ruler with a falcon on his wrist was someone who commanded not just men, but the very winds and beasts. The official stops to water his horse by a fountain, exchanging a few words with the local magistrate who's nearly tripping over his own robes to bow low enough. Meanwhile, soldiers watch the crowd, hands resting casually on sword hilts. You stand there, heart doing a small panicked jig, half expecting one of them to pluck you from the throng for no reason at all. After all, when power walks by, common folk tend to become either invisible or terribly, dangerously visible. Scholars still debate how ordinary townsfolk truly viewed these displays. Were they cowed, impressed, secretly mocking behind closed doors? Some suggest poetry from the period carries hidden barbs, clever metaphors critiquing excess and cruelty, carefully disguised to avoid censure. You suspect that's probably true. People in your world have too much wit and too little patience for tyranny, not to find sly ways to talk back. At last, the official tugs on his reins, the falcon shifts its talons, and the small cavalcade moves off in a swirl of dust and muttered relief. The crowd slowly untangles. Housewives hurry home with baskets clutched tight, Old men lean on canes and mutter darkly about more levies to come. You exhale, realizing you'd been holding your breath the whole time. As you wander back to your courtyard, you notice the low walls seem to glow under the late afternoon sun. The bricks warm your hand as you trail it along. Life here is a constant dance around power, sidestepping tax collectors, flattering petty lords, offering prayers for the Shah's distant health so he might forget your village exists entirely. It's tiring, yet oddly rhythmic, as if the entire society breathes in time with a slow drum you can't quite hear. By nightfall, you're curled under your thin blanket, replaying the image of that falcon's keen eyes. Part of you wonders what it would be like to soar above all this dust and fear, aloof and hungry, answerable only to the call of wind. But then your own stomach rumbles, and the fantasy fades into the practical worry of what tomorrow's meal might look like. The sun drifts lazily overhead, dipping toward a horizon smudged in ochre and rose. You spend the afternoon helping your neighbor patch a section of her courtyard wall, mixing mud with straw and slapping it into stubborn cracks. The work leaves your arms streaked and aching, but you're quietly pleased by how the new plaster smooths out, sealing in the cool air for another season. When you finally straighten up, back creaking, she hands you a chipped cup of mint water. You sit together on a low bench, sipping and watching children chase each other with squealing delight. It's a simple, honest pleasure. One of the few steady comforts in a world that otherwise lurches from drought to rumor to the ever-present smell of dung. As dusk gathers, a faint drumbeat starts up near the town's edge. You stroll that way and discover a tiny shrine lit by flickering oil lamps. Pilgrims cluster around, some murmuring prayers, others tying little scraps of cloth to the wooden lattice in hopes of curing an ache or winning a spouse. A mainstream piece of your sleepy history lesson, Sufi orders flourished across medieval Persia, their gatherings blending song, dance, and fervent poetry to draw closer to the divine. Even people who barely scrape by day to day might donate a coin or two, hoping for blessings or just to share in the hypnotic swirl of devotion. Nearby, a young dervish spins slowly, arms outstretched, face upturned to catch the last scraps of daylight. His robe flares and settles, marking a rhythm older than the town's crumbling walls. The watching crowd stands hushed, all private troubles momentarily smoothed over by the grace of that turning figure. Then, with a suddenness that makes you laugh under your breath, two boys dash past you waving sticks, pretending to duel like noble warriors. Their makeshift swords clack together, breaking the spell. A quirky local tidbit. Mothers sometimes scold children by telling them the spirits of old poets watch such rough play, offended by the noise. Whether the spirits truly mind is, predictably, an open scholarly debate, but it makes for a charming threat to keep little mischiefs in line. Eventually, the lamps burn lower, the pilgrims begin drifting home, and the shrine quiets to soft whispers and fading footsteps. You linger a moment longer, breathing in air heavy with rose incense. Maybe you can't afford a fine turquoise dish or a bolt of silk from Samarkand, but you've witnessed something just as rich. People gathering in fragile unity, trading loneliness for collective hush, each hoping for a mercy that feels almost close enough to touch. You shuffle back through narrow lanes lit by modest lanterns, each doorway spilling a thin glow. A woman sings to her baby behind a lattice, her melody rising like a private prayer into the warm night. The sound wraps around you, soft as spun wool. By the time you reach your own gate, the moon is high, painting every broken tile silver. You press your palm to the cool wood, whisper a small thanks for your breath, your limbs, even your stubborn hunger. Life in medieval Persia isn't easy. It tugs you through markets teeming with filth and wonder, past courts humming with danger, into drought-bitten fields and tense alleys thick with rumor. But it also hands you poetry at street corners, quiet cups of mint water on cracked benches, spinning dervishes under a sky so wide it swallows every fear. In this tangled tapestry of hardship and grace, you find yourself strangely, stubbornly, glad to be here, if only to see how tomorrow unfolds. Now, soften your breath, slow your blinking. Let the final images drift over you like warm linen. Faint lanterns swaying on doorposts, rose-scented air curling through narrow streets, a distant flute repeating some half-forgotten tune. The world around you stills, small worries folding themselves neatly away. Feel your body grow heavier, each muscle unwinding, as if the gentle hush of this old Persian town seeps right through your bones. Even the moon seems to sigh, content to keep its quiet watch above crumbling rooftops. And somewhere, in that calm, you recognize that same fragile thread of hope, the one that carried you through dusty bazaars and laughter-lit courtyards, still cradling you now, urging you softly towards sleep.